Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat or Ashley, and today I want to talk about free spells less than $5, so let's jump right into it. So what I mean by free spells is that these cards are going to give us an option to cast these for free, so let's start with Sphela Ice Shaper, and we're going to focus on the second ability that says we can pay 6, a red and a green, tap this creature, look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may cast a spell from among them without paying the mana cost, and we can put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Next we're talking about Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter, so this is also a really cool commander because whenever you cast your first spell each turn, we're going to reveal the top card of our library, and we can cast it without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with lesser mana value. If you don't cast it, put it into your hand. So either way, we're able to cast this lesser mana value spell, or just put it right into our hand. Next, we're talking about Dazzling Sphinx. It's a 4/5 flyer, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top card of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. We may cast that without paying its mana cost, then that player puts the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of their library in a random order. I think this is a fun one, especially if you're into the chaos theme. You don't know what you're going to get, so maybe you can reveal until you get like a windfall or a mystical tutor, something unexpected but really sweet for your deck. Next we're talking about Geo Golem. I see nobody playing this, but it's a $2.50 card. It's a 5/3 trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone without paying its mana cost. This is really good, especially if your commander is going to get higher with its CMC. Like if it's already a 7 mana spell, that's going to take us at least 7 turns if we play a land each turn, and that's without ramping. But if we play this on turn 5, we can get it out by turn 6 if it's unblocked or if that extra damage gets over. So this is definitely a cool one to consider. Next we're talking about Omni Spell Adept. This is a slower one because we can pay 2 and a blue, tap it, we can cast an instant or sorcery from our hand without paying its mana cost. This is neat, and I like the idea of cheating mana cost, so this is perfect. Next we have Yannette, Cryptic Sovereign. This is a popular commander that cares about odd CMC cards, so whenever this attacks, we reveal the top card of our library, and if its CMC is odd, we can cast it without paying its mana cost, otherwise we're going to draw it. So still, either way, super cool. Next we're talking about Chancellor of Spires. This is a huge CMC card, but it says that you can reveal it in your opening hand, and if you do, at the beginning of the first upkeep, each opponent mills 7 cards, but later when we have it enter the battlefield, it's a 5/7 flyer, and we can cast an instant or sorcery from an opponent's hand without paying its mana cost. So if you can abuse the ETBs of your creatures, this might be one for you to consider. Next we're talking about Diluvian Primordial, and speaking of triggering our ETBs for our creatures, this is another great one for you to consider. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent we can grab an instant or sorcery from their graveyard without paying its mana cost. And if the spell would be put into the graveyard this turn, we have to exile it. Super powerful, and I was able to actually use this the last game I played with my friends. I was able to grab a Chaos Warp, and that actually shaped the game to where we could take care of a player not having their Eldrazi come swing Annihilator at us. So this is a cool creature to have. Next we're talking about Sunforger. So this is an artifact equipment that gives the equipped creature +4/+0, and we can pay a red and a white to unattach this, and we can search our library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less, and we can cast that card without paying its mana cost, and then we'll shuffle our library. What was really neat is that one of my friends would use this specifically for removal spells. So he could grab a Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, and if he really needed to take care of something, this would be a great way to do it. Next we're talking about Wizard's Spellbook. I've never seen this before actually, but it's really neat because we can tap it, and we can exile an instant or sorcery from a graveyard, so not just ours, and then we'll roll a d20, and we can only activate this as a sorcery. So if we roll 1 through 9, we can copy the card, and we may cast the copy, so we will have to pay for that. If we roll 10 through 19, we can copy the card, and we may cast it by paying 1 mana instead of its mana cost, which is really cool, so half a chance there. But if we roll a 20, copy each card exiled with Wizard's Spellbook. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana costs. Wow. And only for 21 cents. This is a really cool card. Next we're talking about a favorite of mine. This is Sunbird's Invocation. So if you play a lot of higher CMC spells, this will get you double. So whenever you cast a spell from your hand, you reveal the top X from your library, where X is the spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from among the cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost, and then you put the rest on your bottom of your library in a random order. Right now its cheapest is $1.10 from Ixalan, and that is super worth it. This is a very powerful card, especially in a Cascade deck and decks that want to abuse just casting spells for free. This does it excellent. Next we're talking about Mog Salvage. If an opponent controls an island and you control a mountain, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost, and it lets you destroy target artifact. So this is a really cool way to get a free shatter effect, and there's a lot of artifacts out there that could be targeted with this that are well worth it. Next we're talking about Obscuring Haze, and this is the least loved from the Ikoria free spell sets. So this one says if we control our commander, we can cast this without paying its mana cost. And it says prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So it is a free fog effect, and it's for $2 compared to the other ones, which are probably 20 or more right now. Next, we're talking about Memory Plunder, another fun one that lets us cast an instant or sorcery card without paying its mana cost from an opponent's graveyard. It is a little bit on the pricier side at $2.80 just for one spell, but compared to the 7 CMC of a creature, maybe this is more worth it to you. It's also an instant, so if that's relevant to you, I really recommend trying this one. Next, we're talking about Spelljack, so we can counter a spell, and if that spell is successfully countered, we can exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard, and then we get to play it instead. But we still have to pay the 6 mana to cast this counter spell. But still, it's a really unique one, and luckily it doesn't go into their graveyard, so if it's a win con or anything that they're going to be able to abuse, we'll be able to take care of that. Next, we're talking about Saram's Expertise. For 2 and 2 white, it's a sorcery that lets us create 3 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens, and we may cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. So we definitely want to play this in decks that care about lower CMC, or else we won't be able to really take advantage of this card because we're paying 4 to get 3 creatures, which is okay. We usually pay 3 mana to get 2 creatures in red, so if your deck is able to abuse the fact that you cast lower CMC spells, I really recommend this one. Next, we have Eugenie's Expertise. So this is a small board wipe that says all creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn, and you may cast converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you're playing lower CMC cards, this might be one for you to try. Next, we're talking about Baral's Expertise. So this lets us return up to 3 target artifacts and or creatures to our hands, and we can cast a spell with mana value 4 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. Really, that 1 mana value difference is very powerful. Also, if we want to return creatures to our hands, or even our opponent's hands, this is a great way to do it. But I like this if we want to take advantage of ETBs and we're able to drop things from our hand. This is a great way to do that. Next, we're talking about Mind's Desire. This is not a favorite of a lot of players because it has Storm. But that's not the thing that they dislike. They dislike it because you have to shuffle your library every single time before you reveal the top card of your library to cast for free. And also, it's 6 CMC, so we'll have to find a lot of ways to cast smaller spells before this, and it's also sorcery speed, so it'll have to be on our turn. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but that's what you get for casting free spells sometimes. Next, we're talking about a favorite of mine, which is Rishkar's Expertise. We can draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, and then we can cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. And this is very powerful. If we have huge creatures in our deck, paying 6 mana to draw, let's say, up to 8 cards, that's great, and also casting one of those things that we could have drawn or already had in our hand for 5 mana value or less, that's really good. Especially for $1.95, I really recommend you pick this one up. Next, we're talking about Brilliant Ultimatum. This is a sorcery that says, exile the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. You may play lands and cast spells from one of those piles. If you cast a spell this way, you cast it without paying its mana cost. Now, this is a 7 mana spell. It's also limited to 3 or more colors, but it's usually found in a Joda deck, which can take advantage of high CMC spells that we're already casting. But if you're playing an Esper deck that can take advantage of this would be a cool one to play. Next, we're talking about Aminatu's Augury. I just played this in that last game I was talking about, where I grabbed a Chaos Warp with Diluvian Primordial. So we get to exile the top 8 cards of our library. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield, and until end of turn, for each non-land card type, you may cast a spell of that type among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. A creature, an enchantment, an artifact, an instant, a sorcery. If you play a lot of different spells, not just limited to creatures or enchantments, this is a great card for you. The 8 mana is totally worth it. Next, we're talking about Mosswort Bridge. This has Hideaway, so when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped, and we look at the top 4 cards of our library. We're going to exile one face down and put the rest on the bottom of our library. We can tap it for green like normal, or if we have 10 or more power that we control, we can actually pay a green, tap this land, and we can just cast that spell for free. Same for Spinerock Null. If we have dealt an opponent 7 or more damage this turn, we can actually pay a red and tap this instead to cast that exiled card. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to purchase any of these cards, I'll have a list in the description down below. Thank you to the patrons who help support this show, and thank you to the viewers who help by liking, commenting, subscribing. I really appreciate your help with that, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.